Okay, let me do that. For this organizational meeting, let me apologize at the beginning for not being with you in Morgan Hills tonight. I inadvertently found myself double booked, and not just double booked, but double booked in locations that are 400 miles apart. And hopefully this phone arrangement will prove satisfactory. In Costa Mesa, just outside of the UC Irvine campus, and I'm an invited participant in a 2-day UC Irvine Law School discussion of habitat, conservation planning, strategy, and implementation issues. So I felt it was worth my time and effort to try to be here, but then I realized also after accepting that I had this meeting, and so we're trying to do double duty. First item on the agenda is the selection of a chair and a vice chair. 1-year term starts, it's an annual term, calendar-wise, at the first meeting of the year. So this is an appropriate item to be taken up today.
So Ken, do you want to take the lead in giving any more information on that, or how would you like to proceed with
well, it's the duties are spelled out in the rules and regulations. Essentially, it is running the meeting and chairing it. And I think people probably have been in various situations where with the chairperson. The one thing that may be a little bit unusual is that there is a provision that the chair or the vice chair, although I think that probably could be designated, but the chair or the vice chair should attend implementation and governing board meetings. But other than that, it's again a 1-year meeting, a 1-year term. You preside at the meetings. Chair does. Vice chair, if the chair is not available, sign the minutes and those types of duties. So there's nothing very oddball about this other than the attendance at the board meetings.
So do we have anybody that's interested in being chair? Any nominations for chair and or vice chair, or any questions about those two roles?
I nominate Jan.
Right out of the gate.
For which? I thought we might look for volunteers.
That's a good idea. That's a good idea.
But before we go any further, some people have a 2-year term, some have a 4-year term. I would suggest the vice chair be a 4-year term person so that there can be a holdover in case the vice chair is not reappointed in 2 years.
Is there any question as to who has, if you have questions as to your term or somebody else says, I do have them here, so.
I don't know.
Okay, so I can just go through this. Walt Glines is a 4-year term. Jan Hintermeister is a 2-year term. Joseph Lovelace is a 4-year term. Craig Edgerton is a 4-year term. Julie Hutchison is a 2-year term. And Jennifer Shear is a 4-year term. And there will be additional PAC members in the future.
So I would like to say I'd like to volunteer for the vice chair position. I know I have a 4-year term, so that may mean that the chair, and in 2 years I might be willing to step up and take that role. But I think
you're in training.
I am
right after we vote.
Thank you.
And if there isn't any opposition, somebody can make a motion to go ahead and appoint Joseph Lovelace as the vice chair, and we can vote.
Jan, you have no problem filling out the duties of the main thing being able to attend the meetings?
Well, actually, no. That's why I actually wouldn't volunteer. Just because, for me, I live up in Santa Clara, and kind of coming down here for meetings is like, unless we have like a regular dial-in type thing. I'm not sure if that's routine or
we don't
whether
have
that's
that set
really
up
part
for
of our
the governing and implementation board meetings at this time.
Yeah. So I'd be reluctant to do it just because of that. I think it'd be a little bit hard to get down here.
Well, I do live down here, and so it's only a short drive. And so if no one else wants to, I would be more than willing, but some people might have, more interest. And yes, I do have interest because I'm here, but that's up to you folks to decide.
Well, I think interest is a pretty important qualification.
Yes, I agree. So I will nominate Walter as the chair.
And second?
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then if
Appreciate
you
the
could vote on that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And do we need a nomination for Joseph? I nominate Joseph as vice chair.
Second that.
And that was great, okay. I'll learn your voices very soon. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes as well. So we have Walt Glines as the chair for 1 year, with Joseph Lovelace as the vice chair for 1 year. So Walt, if you'd like, you can go ahead and take over running the meeting. If you have any questions, we're obviously here to help.
Thank you. Okay, so the first item of business we just accomplished. And so we're on item number 2, review the implementation board adopted public advisory committee rules and regulations. Michelle, if you want to lead us through this, or Ken?
Ken?
Okay, thank you. We've attached staff report that went to the implementation board in September with the for the establishment of the Public Advisory Committee. The referred management team is a shorthand way of referring to senior staff from the 6 local permittees, San Jose, Gilroy, Morgan Hill, the county, Valley Transportation, and Valley Water District, as well as the Habitat Agency, who meet on a very regular basis to work on a whole wide variety of different tasks. And one of the things they worked on is the development of rules and regulations for the Public Advisory Committee, and that is what is attached to the staff report that is in your packet, the September 19th staff report. Very briefly, it calls out a number of roles and duties. What I would like to do, I think, is go through the rules and regulations after some of these opening comments to see what questions may be generated by that. The staff report summarizes roles and duties. The PAC membership is 9 people. 6 positions are filled. The 2 business and development community positions are not filled, and 1 of the farming and ranching community positions are not filled. We have been doing some outreach. We are getting some indications of interest. I think there is a very good chance that at the March implementation board meeting, which is next meeting, that the implementation board can take this up. The recommendations for membership are the committee of Supervisor Wasserman and Water District Board Member Brian Schmidt, and then I joined them in reviewing applications. But I would anticipate that by the time of the next PAC meeting, you will have a full complement of members. The staff report also lists some organizational features in terms of appointment, the term of office, the 4-year and a 2-year staggering terms. The allocation of 4 and 2 was determined by the sophisticated member of alphabetical order. So we put members within the different categories in alphabetical order, and I think first was 4-year and the second was 2-year, or maybe it was reversed. But it was nothing more complicated than that. Again, terms are limited to 2 full 4-year terms. Frequency of meetings would be regular meetings or quarterly. There can be special meetings called by the Public Advisory Committee if warranted, if needed. Meetings are subject to the Brown Act, which means public notice. Meetings are open to the public. There's a minutes and recording of votes, etc., to provide the public with a way of following the work of the Public Advisory Committee. Quorum is 5 members, so right now it's 5 out of 6. You had quorum to start, even with member Jennifer Shearer not yet in attendance. And regular participation is expected. We will record absences, and one of the ways of losing the PAC seat would be 3 consecutive unexcused absences. again, the process, the role of the committee is to both advise and as well as communicate with the public. We've identified, again, the areas that the committee would focus on. So the rules and regulations are, I think, spelled out quite clearly. You'll find that management team members and senior staff members are, in combination, quite detailed in the work they do on this and a lot of other subjects. So the rules and regulations, I don't intend to go through them in page by page, so why don't we just take a see if there are any questions on the rules and regulations. But I'm here. Debbie Cobble, I know, is in the room. I'm not sure who else is in the room from the local partners, but Debbie worked on this as well as others. So we can tag team in terms of responding to questions. And Michelle, what would help me is if you repeat the question.
Absolutely.
Make sure I get clear through the line.
My pleasure.
I just have a question of curiosity. Is there a state holiday on May 1st?
So Julie Hutchison asked the question if there's a state holiday on May 1st.
Oh, I don't believe so.
Just because for the May holiday, for the May meeting, the first Thursday would be May 1st, and in the packet it shows that meeting's going to be May 8th. It's just a question of curiosity. May 1st.
Oh, actually, it should be May 1st. There was confusion, I think, primarily on my part, in going with May 8th, saying May 8th at one point in time. Well, the next meeting would be on Thursday, May 1st.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question for Ken as well. So my question was about duties. The rules and regulations said that the purpose of the body is to make recommendations when requested. Actually, requested is different than what's in the packet. So I guess I'd like to just understand whether your view of this committee is to have like standing items on the agenda, or whether it was really we'll just be reviewing whatever has been specifically requested by the by one of the governing bodies.
So Ken, Jen Hintermeister is asking for clarification. One set of information says that the PAC will provide recommendations as recommended, and a different set of information contradicts that. So his question is, do we anticipate standing action items or review items for the PAC, or will items come to them as the governing and or implementation board needs advice or recommendations? Is that?
I think it will be both. The duties identify a variety of things that need to come to you. There's interpretation in terms of what are broad policy issues, but implementation strategies, reserve system assembly strategies, these types of things we would try to call out and make sure that we get to you and through the Public Advisory Committee before they go on to the board. The agency budget, we'll get to that a little bit later. It's a little strange in this startup period, but we'll come back to that. Fees, that type of thing, annual report. And then, so those are things that you can anticipate coming to you. I think we have not defined, so I'm not aware of defining what broad policy issues are, so there's some flexibility there, some discretion. At the same time, I can envision items coming up where we would recommend, staff would recommend that implementation board or the governing board refer the particular item to the Public Advisory Committee. There certainly could be items coming up over the course of the years that if it's in doubt, then we could do an actual referral.
Okay, and Debbie Cobble has come up to the podium, I think, to add to or be available for any further questions.
May I, Mr. Chair? I did want to note that in your packet is the draft resolution that went to the implementation board. I think Ken wanted you to have the staff report and see what went. You should have all gotten the final resolution, and the very good question you asked about is it requested or not. This resolution, the final resolution, has somewhat different wording and is talks about when requested to do so. And I think part of the thinking was that this is a really important committee, but we're not expecting you to meet every month. And so we're trying to modulate getting good input without raising the expectations that it's a full-time job. So please review the final copy of the resolution that you should have received tonight. And there were a few little tweaks that were made after the implementation board considered the resolution, including clarifying that, addressing your question. Thank you.
So Ken, Debbie just clarified.
I heard that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I have a question related to that, and that if, for instance, there was a request for a permit transfer, whatever, that the agency itself is going to be involved in, and if there are some kind of deadlines that must be met, would we be available? Would we be asked? Would it be required that we make an advisory recommendation to the agency board itself?
Ken, did you catch that? Or
Yes, we will certainly try to stop any of those ahead of time as we do agenda. We're doing agenda planning at the staff level, at the management team level, out of about 6 months right now, 6-7 months. And we will incorporate into that red flagging public advisory committee items and make sure that we get schedules aligned, agendas aligned to meet those needs. If there was something unusual and urgent that came up, we would request, and when I say we, I'm talking about implementation agency staff, Valley Habitat agency staff, that we would recommend having a special PAC meeting if there was some need to address an issue that needed to be expedited.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
Yes, I have a question. Hi, Ken. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for the opportunity to be here. I'm very honored. And I would like to know, as a member of the general public, for outreach, for community outreach specifically, is there a guideline or a plan for us to interact with our constituency groups? Will there be some guidance along the way, or are we at liberty to just sort of make it up as we go along?
Hello. Ken, did you catch that?
My sense is that outreach involves certainly a variety of things, from the annual meeting and an annual review of documents where we will have meetings where we do more specific noted than item like an annual report. But what we also would hope is that members of the Public Advisory Committee take on we use the word obligation, that may be a little bit strong, but a desire to, if you spot an opportunity for an organization that you're a part of, that where some information from the Habitat Agency would be beneficial. It could be a speaker at a meeting, it could be having someone come to talk about a specific issue of interest or concern, that PAC members should contact staff, contact me in this interim period, and we would make arrangements for covering that type of situation. We would also be developing over time outreach information, summaries of documents. Some of that is in the packet later on when we get to the issue of what is the habitat plan and the PowerPoint that's in the packet. Frequently asked questions, but if you run into situations where people can use additional information, that could be a one-on-one, it can be a group, it can be an organization. Please be sensitive to those and communicate that to us, and we can follow up and coordinate with you as appropriate.
Okay, thank you. I have one more follow-up question to that, Ken. I have some connections at San Jose State. I'm a recent graduate from the Environmental Studies Department there, and I hope to include some of the students and professors in that program and in the sciences programs as well, to invite them to become a part of this plan or at least be involved in it. I know there's community service hours that students need, and they could come and speak or attend meetings, but I'd also like to address attending events, Earth Day on campus, and maybe some other things, and then also reaching out to my professors and some of their extracurricular activities and getting involved there. And I just wanted to know, in order to do that, I would come back and go through the implementation board in order to make that happen.
I think if you spot things like that, contact me or my successor. Certainly, personally, I periodically attend classes, give presentations. I have met with groups of students, individual students, and groups of students. We intend to find ways of involving students wherever possible in data collection and other activities where we want to look for that, for those opportunities. But if something comes up, please give me a call, and then we can identify the most appropriate way to pursue it.
Thank you.
Other comments, questions? Oh, before I go any further, though, if the minutes could reflect that Jennifer Scheer is with us. Thank you. Other comments, questions? Hearing none, it's back to Ken.
So Ken, it doesn't appear that any action is required for item 2, is that correct?
No action, just review the information which you have done. The next agenda item is reviewing conflict of interest filing requirements. Michelle Wilson, who is the agency's clerk, is supposed to have the meeting and can respond to processing questions. She handles this for the city of Morgan Hill. If we get into more technical questions, Vera Thordo, who's our attorney, is also double booked tonight. She is at the City of San Jose committee meeting where she is required to attend. So she is not available, but we would connect you up with Vera to ask our questions on more specific issues that should be run by our attorneys. But Michelle can provide some of the overview processing issues. I think the key date in all of this is that you need to file first you have to file Form 700. We've attached the staff report that went to the implementation board, and we've also, and attached to that is the resolution, and attached to that is explanation of what needs to be disclosed. And that is due within 30 days of your appointment, and the appointment was on January 16th. I think several of you have filed it already. And the filing process is through a coordinated system within the county of Santa Clara. And Michelle can pick up details from there if there are questions.
Do any of you have questions so far about Form 700 filing? I know a few of you have filed your Form 700s. Essentially, it's your conflict of interest and revealing any other interests you may have that may conflict, obviously, with the Habitat Agency's interests. It's an online filing system. We have worked with the County of Santa Clara. It's very user-friendly. I did send you quite a long email with instructions and hotline information for the FPPC. And you should have both Vera and I's contact information. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to contact us. If one of us can't help you, then we can definitely get you in the right direction. If you find that you need to amend it, it's very simple to amend your form on the electronic filing website. And for those of you that have not submitted it already, it is very simple, and we'll guide you through it, but I'm happy to help. And if there is anyone that does not want to use the e-file system or has any apprehension with it, we can touch base, and you can absolutely file a hard copy if you would prefer that.
If we filed it and haven't heard anything back, can we assume it was done correctly?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
It will get filed with the County of Santa Clara. I can do a cursory review of it and see if there are any changes. The beauty of the e-file system is it does go through and look for certain things to make sure they're completed, so you're not submitting an incomplete form.
Okay.
Okay, any questions, comments, concerns? Okay, next agenda item.
Oh, it's me.
review information on the preparation, content, and implementation of the Valley Habitat Plan.
Agenda item 4, let me introduce Clara Donovan with ICS Jones & Stokes. Jones & Stokes is the consulting company that was subsequently became a part of ICF, which is a national consulting company, international. ICF Jones & Stokes came on board back in 2005 as having primary responsibility for biological work and development and writing of the habitat plan. So they were the sort of the central technical and writing consultant on developing the habitat plan. Clara is the project manager for Jones & Stokes. Some of you remember met David Zippen, who was the project manager in 2005. Subsequently, David has moved on to other projects, although he's still available. He answers questions on a regular basis. Catherine Gaffney's been involved as project manager, and now Clara has that role. And the two things that have been provided is a PowerPoint, and this is a PowerPoint that was developed in part for, as part of a training program that we have been running for local staff, and we're doing it for consultants, and we'll be doing it for property owners and others over the while. So we've been developing a training program, and you're hearing the first part of that, which is what is the plan. And then it's also attached from the website frequently asked questions. And we've been working on trying to make those as thorough and as possible without getting it to staggering length. But we find that some questions have, over the course of the years, come back again and again, and they are good to cover as a frequently asked question. So let me turn this over to Clara for the presentation. And with each of the slides, feel free to ask questions as Clara moves through this. I think it would be good not to try to save up questions until the end, but if something comes up with a particular slide, take a moment to ask the question in real time as we go through this.
Thanks, Ken. Hi, everyone. I'm Clara Donovan, and I'm sorry that my back is to half the room. Yeah, I think I actually might go up here.
Do you want me to turn the laptop so it faces you?
No, I can't see the screen. Just to give you a little background about me, I'm a conservation biologist. I've been with ICF Jones & Stokes for over 6 years. The entire time I've been working on the Habitat Conservation Plan, the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Plan, both in development, now in implementation. This is the third habitat plan that I've worked on implementation on. So if you have any questions about anything, I can answer them. All right. So this is just a really brief overview of understanding the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Plan. I'm not going to go on in depth about anything, so if you have questions, please ask. So we're going to cover why a regional habitat plan, what is the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Plan, what are the roles and responsibilities, and what are the benefits. So there's a few key terms I want to introduce you to, and some of you may be familiar with these. One is the idea of take. So that's there's both a state and federal definition of that, but in general it's to harm, harass, hunt, or otherwise bother any sort of threatened or endangered species. Take authorization is what really our habitat plan is. It is a permit to take endangered species. And with the habitat plan, they're both listed or have the potential to be listed during the permit term. The permit term is the length of our permits under the habitat plan, which is 50 years. Covered projects are projects and activities that receive take coverage or under the habitat plan, and these might be activities done by private individuals or public entities. And then the covered species are the 18 species that we address in the habitat plan, and I'll talk about this a little bit more. So why a regional habitat plan? In general, endangered species permitting happens on a project-by-project basis. There are several agencies to go through a lot of redesign. We call this the death spiral. You go to local government, you go to the Fish and Wildlife agencies, you might go to the regional board, you might go to the Corps, and you're getting different permits from different entities, and you're doing mitigation that is not necessarily well planned out. So the habitat plan allows for a more streamlined process. It allows for one-stop shopping to get several permits and allows for better conservation to take place here in Santa Clara County. So it links endangered species permitting to the city and county general plans and regional infrastructure needs. It's a plan for purchase and preservation of the best habitat in the region. And results in a regional reserve system, and it contributes to species recovery. Habitat conservation plans in general usually are based on the conservation biology principles of larger is better. You should have large connected reserves with minimum edges, and that fewer larger preserves are better. So I've already kind of skipped ahead. Spoiler alert that this is indeed a 50-year plan, a regional plan to protect endangered species in Santa Clara County and other natural resources while allowing for orderly development. The plan results in endangered species permits from the state and federal wildlife agencies for 50 years. And it's not a voluntary document. It is a permit, and it is a regulatory document, so it is not optional to comply with. So the permit area. So you'll notice that the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Plan doesn't cover all of Santa Clara County. It really focuses on the build out of San Jose, Morgan Hill, and Gilroy. It is most of the city of San Jose except for the Baylands area, because that gets into a different suite of species. It's all the cities of Morgan Hill and Gilroy. It is most of the watersheds of Guadalupe, Coyote, and the Pajaro. And then it excludes Henry Coe State Park. Henry Coe State Park is excluded because state parks did not want to be involved in the habitat plan. So we took them out. And also you'll see up here, it's called the Extended Permit Area for Burrowing Owl Conservation. And this is the only area that extends outside of Santa Clara County. And you'll see there's a little bit of an area here too. This is special because the burrowing owls population here in the county is very low, and their breeding habitat is really centered in San Jose and a lot of the infill development areas. So in order for us to develop in Santa Clara County, we're going to have to look at preserving the burrowing owl population outside the county as well, because it's all one population, and there's just not enough breeding pairs inside the county to limit our conservation there. Go ahead.
So does this only look at breeding habitat, or does it look at dispersal habitat for foraging?
So the focus on burrowing owl is breeding habitat. So there's lots of dispersal and overwintering habitat throughout the county.
Right.
But our strategy really focuses on recovering burrowing owl in the county and recovering the burrowing owl breeding population. So all the breeding owl pairs are up here in the northern part of the county. Okay, so this is a specific question, but it has a general application. If a new breeding area is found, does it get added to the HCP, or what happens in that situation? It's actually a very good question. Right now we're in the process of initiating the burrowing owl survey group, and we're going to do a survey effort in the spring, and then at the end of the summer, to identify to revisit all the known breeding pairs in the county, in our permit area, and then look to see if there's any new ones as well. So that's part of our strategy. So as new breeding pairs are found, those locations will be mapped, and our plan requirements will be adjusted to account for where those are. So when I say plan requirements, I mean how we apply burrowing owl fees, and where we target land to be acquired for the species.
So if a burrowing owl habitat is found outside those little dotted lines, say 100 yards,
Outside the count, outside, like, out here.
outside of the area, is there the ability to incorporate that in, or is that just go to somebody else's habitat plan, or how would that work if it were pretty close?
If it was pretty close, we'd evaluate that on a case-by-case basis.
I guess what I'm saying is...
Do you know of some that we've missed?
Not yet, but I'm looking hard.
Okay.
No, but I'm saying, does the plan allow for annexation of additional, maybe that's a better way to
So
put
that
the
would
question.
require a permit amendment to change the area.
Okay, that's, so you'd have to go to the agencies to do that? Okay,
Yes.
That's what I was really
Yeah.
trying to get to.
Yes. Any other questions about the permit area? All right, so which species do we cover? So we cover 18 species. The one invertebrate, the bay checker spot butterfly, 4 amphibians, reptiles, so California tiger salamander, red-legged frog, foothill yellow-legged frog, the western pond turtle. 3 birds, the western burrowing owl, Leesbell's vireo, and the tricolored blackbird. 1 mammal, the San Joaquin kit fox. And I can't count that many plants in my mind. I think it's 11. Tiburon, Indian, paintbrush, coyote ceanothus, Mount Hamilton thistle, Santa Clara Valley deadlia, fragrant fritillary, Loma Prieta hoita, smooth lysyngia, the Metcalf Canyon jewel flower, and the most beautiful jewel flower. Most of these plants are serpentine-dependent plants. Question?
So this is my second question that I had thought of, because I went through this slide presentation.
Okay.
Briefly, what is the process of adding species to this?
So if we were to add species to the habitat plan, we would also have to seek a permit amendment. And what we would do first, we would evaluate. We go through the same evaluation process that we did to initially select these covered species. So you might be thinking of, for example, Townsend big-eared bat is now a candidate species. And so we would look to see if that species is going to be impacted by the covered activities here in the county. Does our conservation strategy currently address that species needs? If not, how can it be expanded to address it? And then design a series of avoidance minimization measures, and then seek an amendment with the wildlife agencies to include the species.
Okay, so I do have a species that I'm thinking about. So is that something that we, as the PAC, would bring forward in this type of a meeting, or how would we do something like that?
That's a good question that I don't have an answer to. I could guess, but I'm going to defer to Ken. So Ken, did you hear the question?
I would appreciate it was repeated, please.
Sure. So Mr. Craig Edgerton is wondering if there was a species that he or any other member of the PAC was interested in adding to the plan. Would it be appropriate for the PAC to bring that at one of their meetings and provide that recommendation to the governing and/or implementation board? Or what would the process be to add a species to the plan?
There are 2 parts to the question. The process to add a species to the plan is a major amendment. A major amendment is a relatively long, complicated process. It means taking well, for a species, you would need to do species modeling and a lot of analysis, creating the specific amendment. It then goes through environmental review. It will go through a Federal Register notice after being accepted by the Federal Fish and Wildlife Service. Public hearings. It is the same process as adopting a plan. So major amendments are a very big deal. If there was a species that was concerned, certainly a PAC member could raise the issue of coverage for a species. I'll add that in developing the list of species, the final list of species, we started with 147 and worked it down basically using the criteria of a variety of criteria which are in the habitat plan. But looking especially for species, certainly that were listed, I mean, that became sort of automatic if they're listed. Or if there was a reasonably good likelihood of the species being listed. The concern we had and the concern of coming out of the experience of other habitat plans is that each species in the plan entails a notable amount of work related to management and monitoring and reporting requirements, land assembly, potentially for specifically address the species. So we tried to have the species list as focused as we could. Western Riverside Habitat Conservation Plan has 140-some species. They are on the other extreme of this, and they have a monumental monitoring and management and reporting obligation built into that plan. So I think certainly the wildlife agencies cautioned us against putting everything on the list that we thought was sort of interest. That's how we got to the 18. We eliminated several species during the 2012 adjustments to the plan that came out that were undertaken after the plan's first public review, the final draft plan public review. So bottom line, adding a species is a major undertaking. It can be considered, but it is a decision that would need to be considered very, very carefully.
Does anyone have any other questions of Ken on this
So
item?
maybe the other half of the question was, what would this group bring a recommendation to start a study based on some information that was available, or would each of us as an individual go to somebody at the staff once we have a staff, a biologic staff? Technical people, whether it's Jones or ICF or whoever. How would that go about?
Ken, did you catch that?
My sense is the process that I would recommend if a member of the PAC has a concern, interest in, wants to pursue further work on a specific species, to raise that issue with us, myself and others working on the plan. There may well be background information that we have in terms of that species may have been considered and specifically eliminated for a particular reason. So let us take a look at that, and then the PAC member can decide whether they wish to bring it to the full PAC or not. I think it would be, the process to consider that would be from a member to place on the agenda the consideration of species X for inclusion in the plan, and then that recommendation reviewed by the PAC and as forwarded to the implementation board and the governing board. I think a major amendment of the plan probably involves the governing board as well as the implementation board, but I need to check on it. But it would work its way up the system in that regard. We would also want to consult certainly with the two wildlife agencies early on, because they would have a lot of input into that process.
Okay, that's enough for now. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, I have a couple of similar questions, and this is walk lines. The wildlife and plants on the list are on the federal list. Is that correct?
They're both on the species are on both the federal and state permits.
Okay, all right. So it's required. Now, do we have other wildlife and plants that are in our area that are not on this?
That are listed?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Okay, and why are those not listed?
For example, we elected not to cover fish. There's several fish that are listed in the plan area because they're just very difficult to do conservation for, and getting permits for fish are quite difficult. And so we elected to avoid impacts to fish, and if fish permits are necessary for a specific project, that applicant would seek their own permits.
and go through the forever process of the government never rules on it.
Yes.
Okay. Then in order for us to put, or for the PAC to put it on, in the agency itself to put it on the wildlife or plant list, would it have to concurrently be put on the federal and state lists?
So the species that we covered under the habitat plan are either currently listed or have the potential to be listed in the next 50 years. So the species would not actually have to be listed, but if it fell into potential to be listed, we would consider it.
Or whatever you call it, okay.
Yeah, we used 4 criteria to select the covered species. One was, is the species listed or has the potential to be listed? Is it present in the study area? Is it likely to be impacted by covered activities? And is there enough information about the species to design a conservation strategy for the species?
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions on this point? Okay, if you could continue then. Thank you.
Okay, next is talking about the covered activities. And these are the types of activities that are covered under the habitat plan. There's 6 broad categories: urban development, rural development, new public infrastructure, public operations, maintenance, and capital projects, the water district activities, and then reserve system activities. So that's activities that are related to implementing the conservation strategy. Are there any questions about covered activities? So who developed the plan? The plan was prepared by the City of Gilroy, Morgan Hill, San Jose, County of Santa Clara, the Water District, and the Valley Transportation Authority. And this process, I think, was initiated back in 2002 through a memorandum of understanding between these entities, and they've been working on the plan and together have adopted it. And yes, it is a very abbreviated history. Are there any questions? I can go into more detail about the plan, who developed it, and how it was developed, if you like. So what are the benefits? So the habitat plan provides local control. It allows the cities in the county to extend that take permits to their own private applicants. So through a city or the cities or the county, a private citizen can go and seek an endangered species permit. Otherwise, you'd have to have a federal nexus and go through perhaps the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers or do your own low-effect HCP. So instead of doing that, you can just work with your local planning office. It's cost-effective. The plan it's cost-effective because it pools resources. So as the private applicants are permitting their projects, public projects are permitting their own projects and developing them. Everyone's paying fees into a central fund. So instead of each person going out and have to get their own mitigation, the money is pooled together, and the Habitat Agency and you guys here on the PAC will be helping to develop the reserve system as well as monitor and manage those lands. There's increased certainty. So the mitigation requirements are known ahead of time. So you as an applicant, if you have a project that you want to develop, there's an application that you fill out. I would say that the permitting process could run a year just because of perhaps some of the surveys that you have to do to comply with the habitat plan. And then ultimately the habitat plan will contribute to species recovery and land conservation. A number of the species covered in the plan, once the habitat plan is fully implemented, could be delisted because we'll have reached recovery targets for those species. Any questions?
You mean delisted, if it's a federally listed, it would be listed federally?
We
or
are,
you mean just in our area?
I think federally, I think with a few of the serpentine plant species, if we achieve all of our biological goals and objectives, it would contribute to them being delisted because the recovery targets would be achieved.
And that's basically the world population of them.
Yes.
I didn't know
It's
that.
kind of exciting.
It is in a way until you understand that that's the only population of them. And even though we may hit the goals,
Yeah.
there's still things that could happen because they're so limited in there.
It's true.
But that's for another issue.
So again, the streamlined permitting is one of the benefits of the plan. So here with the habitat plan, you get both your federal and state permits for endangered species, for those species covered in the plan. We're currently working on getting the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers permit for wetlands under half an acre, and then stream impacts under 300 linear feet. And then coming even later are the regional board permits. Those have been a little bit more difficult to streamline, but the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, we anticipate getting those sometime this year. So that allows there to be, in 2014, where you would have the ability to get 3 permits through the habitat plan. Other questions about that? So who is responsible for overseeing the habitat plan? You've met Ken Shriver, I'm sure, in person at some point, and tonight on the phone. He is the interim executive director of the Habitat Agency. And the Habitat Agency is made up of just Ken right now, and Jill here in the audience, and Michelle is the clerk. But it is also more than those 3 people. We have the implementation board as well as the governing board that make decisions on plan implementation. And then the co-permittees work on helping out with implementation decisions through a management meeting we have about every other week now, and then also implementation committee meetings that work on helping with plan interpretation to ensure that it's interpreted uniformly across all the co-permittees. I'll go into a little bit more about how your role fits in this in a second. So each co-permit agency is responsible for ensuring its own public projects are carried out in conformance with the plan. So there's a permit in hand. So Santa Clara Valley Water District, the cities, the county, and VTA are all responsible for making sure that their own projects that are permitted through this plan are doing so in accordance with the plan. And then the county and the cities are responsible for ensuring that their private applicants are complying with the plan.
I have a question on that. It says private development projects. Say a school district was building a school that was the home for a burrowing owl. So would that come under the agency's purview?
Yes, that would come under the agency. They would apply as a participating special entity, and that's extended to public or quasi-public entities are allowed to apply directly through the Habitat Agency.
Thank you.
And it's optional. Yeah, we don't have to let them in. Thank you. And those are, so as a PSC, it goes through a similar process as a private applicant, except for the implementation committee needs to approve that they're covered activity, and they can elect not to extend coverage.
Thank you.
So here's a kind of a schematic of how it all works. So we have the Habitat Agency in the middle. Covered activities are regulated by co-permittee staff. Private developers also work through co-permittee staff. The wildlife agencies really have an oversight role rather than a decision-making role in the habitat plan. There are about 76 items we need their review or approval over, but those are mostly plan implementation. They don't necessarily approve development that happens under the plan unless you're a participating special entity. Then they have the ability to review the application. There is independent science that is brought into the process, science advisors, and then an independent conservation assessment team. public input is sought through you guys, the Public Advisory Committee, as well as the general public. And then there's a whole host of folks that help out with the land, water management, and monitoring. And that ranges from Habitat agency staff to landowners, consultants, contractors, the local land and water management agencies, technical advisory committee, as well as the wildlife agencies. So, you know, we've got someone here from Don Rocha from County Parks here today, and you know, he will be playing a role in land and water management and monitoring, because the Habitat agency will be enrolling a few thousand acres of county parks land into our reserve system. Other questions? That's it. That's the overview.
One last chance for questions.
Actually, I have a question on the PSEs.
Sure.
Can they elect to not have coverage, or do they need to apply? Can they do business as usual?
So they do
As though there were no plan, as though this were 1992?
They can do business as usual and seek their own permits from the wildlife agencies. It is highly likely that the wildlife agencies would send them to the Habitat agency
If they needed a
permit.
Coverage, right. But if
Correct.
they didn't need a permit.
If they did not need a permit, they could just keep on going.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so let's go on to agenda item number 5, review information on the Habitat Agency's fiscal year 13, 2012-13, and fiscal year 14, 2013-14 budgets.
Okay, thank you. As a comment on the previous agenda item, the Habitat Plan is a little over 2,000 pages, and that's not the environmental review. So undoubtedly questions will come up, and please give us a call whenever they do, or stop us at a meeting. Trying to boil the Habitat Plan down to 20 slides or type of an overview, obviously, is a very difficult challenge, but there will be issues that come up that you will want more information on, and just give me any time to request that, raise the issue. On agenda item 5, and it's really 5 and then 6. 5 is a review of the first year and then the current year's budgets, and the activities that have been undertaken in these last months. And then the following agenda item is a review of the work being done, the planning being done on the next year's budget, the FY15, the 2014-15 budget. A couple of observations on all of this, I think from where we started. Starting up a new public agency is something that most of us involved in this process have never done. One or two people have, but most have not done, and it is a daunting exercise. We started out with an agency that was formed on April the 26th of 2013. It meant that the first year's budget, which was a July 1 to June 30th budget, needed to cover the approximately 9 weeks from April 26th through June 30th. And then we had the first full year budget kicking in after that. The Habitat Plan includes a cost model that identifies cost items in considerable detail, at the same time putting together the specifics of the initial year's first year and then the very short first year and then the second year budget. Involved a lot of estimates, a lot of educated assumptions or educated guesses at times as to what costs would occur and when they would occur. For example, with insurance, we had a general number of $20,000 a year. Reality came in at $4,200 a year for the first year. But we had an estimate on the cost model for $20,000, so that's what we plugged in, and then we found that the actual cost was less. Some costs didn't start up as fast as we thought because they needed various agreements and contracts in place before any type of cost expense could be incurred. So we made the estimates for the first 9 weeks, and we made the estimates for the first year. The work of the Habitat Agency itself, the implementation board and the governing, and most often both the implementation board and the governing board met every month from May through November. And I don't think anybody at the start expected that they signed up for a meeting every month, month after month after month, but we did. And the staff report includes a list that I just pulled off the agendas of things that were done in these first 6, 7 meetings. And from standpoint of starting an agency, there's just a lot of things there that don't have necessarily a lot of glitz and glamour, but you need to get people appointed, you need to get contracts approved, you need to approve environmental review guidelines and conflict of interest guidelines and all sorts of things like that, all of which took time and effort to develop. And there's great appreciation for the members of the management team I referred to before who have poured a great deal of time. I think we met 13 or 14 straight Fridays working on this, and then the only Fridays we've taken off really are until the last month that tend to be Fridays where there's a holiday weekend. So they put in a great deal of time and effort, and they continue to do that. The other thing that went on in this period is that staffs from the local partners, permittees, the 6 local agencies, also in parallel and coordination with the management team, took on the task of what would an application have to contain, how to create an application for coverage under the plan, what would the website need to contain sort of additional information. There's a new website that will be coming online in another couple months. But the point is that there was a great deal of work done in terms of user manuals, people ask questions, applications, that paralleled and is not really reflected in the list of items in the staff report. In terms of policies, we came out of plans development and approval process with several clear messages from the various elected officials. One is keep staff to a minimum. We want to have a small, lean organization. And so right now there are no staff. Because the other message was, whenever possible, use contracts for services rather than hiring staff. So all of the services, all of the resources that are directly affiliated with the Habitat Agency, and that doesn't include all of the staff time that's poured into this from the partners, but the work that I do, that the attorney does, and City of Morgan Hill has 3 agreements. That is all under contracts to very specifically identify costs and try and keep the costs as manageable as possible. So with those guidelines at the beginning, the first budget is attached to staff report. And the first budget covers 2 years, those 9 weeks from FY13 that were left over really from the time the agency started through June 30th, and then the first full year. And the budget is structured to address 2 overall objectives, and these are my objectives essentially, which is to meet basic financial needs and requirements in terms of adopting a budget, but also to be an educational document, because I think it is important that budget documents convey objectives and information about programs being undertaken by an agency. I compared that to another agency in California where the budget consists of 2 Excel spreadsheets. Beginning and end. That's it. One sheet on revenue, one sheet on expenditures, and there's no explanation about really at all. But we've not gone that minimalist way. We've identified in moderate details the work to be done. The bottom line in terms of the first year, that partial year, and also the first half of the first full year, the last 6 months, months of 2013 is in the staff report. There were some adjustments on unexpended funds. This is the staff report that went to the implementing board on January 16th. And essentially the bottom line is that we're doing okay. We are spending does not exceed revenues, and we can get into the details of that. But basically, we're doing okay. From a yes, question?
Oh no.
Okay. From an educational standpoint, what I'd like to do is just to highlight a couple of things in the adopted budget, and then open this for whatever questions there may be. On pages, and this is the document attached to the implementation board, governing board staff report, and first page is Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency's FY13 and FY14 budgets. And there are 4 objectives identified at the bottom of page 1 and then on page 2. And very briefly, where we are with these objectives. The first is establish and implement efficiently functioning use of the habitat plan, review and permitting private and public sector projects. That is a lot of much of that work is the work I referred to by the local agency representatives who have done a great deal of work on the application process and explaining what we're doing and user's manual, etc. Second is, and I would urge people, committee members, to go to our website to sort of explore it, explore the geo-browser, explore the application process. And if you get feedback for us, great. But I think you'll find some things there. The geo-browser, I think, is a tool that no one else has. Every time we've shown it to folks from wildlife agencies or other agencies, for some it's a jaw dropper, but it's like, you did what? How did you do that? And there's great admiration for the fact that tool exists. So that's the first objective. The second is facilitate preparation of the annual report and other information needs by getting a good data collection system underway. The annual report, the first one is for the first full calendar year, so it'll be due in spring, May, March, April, May, something like that, of 2015. But the annual report is required by state and federal governments. It is a fairly detailed document. And one of the lessons learned from my colleagues has been that you should better try to collect information in a way that feeds into the annual report, because if you have to go back and find that information, it can be a long and difficult and expensive process to recreate information over the past year, 15 or 18 months. So we've spent a lot of time, and this is an ongoing effort, to develop databases and application formats that can be get into and smoothed up and provide the types of totals and types of information that's needed in the annual report. And again, the urgency is if you get behind the curve, you pay for it. And the more you get behind, the much higher the bill becomes. The third objective is to work on the regional general permit with the Army Corps of Engineers and work with the water quality control boards. Let me comment on this. I don't think I'm duplicating work that Clara and others may have said in the introduction to the plan, but if I am, let me know. Historically being up until 2 years ago, permits under the Federal Clean Water Act, which are required from the Corps of Engineers and from the United States Environmental Protection Agency, were not integrated into habitat plans at all. The US EPA has delegated their permitting authority to the State Water Board, and they delegate it down to the regional water quality control boards. The Corps of Engineers, we reached out to the Corps of Engineers 5-6 years ago, and were told very bluntly by Corps staff that they had no interest in working on a habitat plan. They reminded us that they don't do, as the man said, remember, we don't attend night meetings, and our offices close at 5 o'clock, and all meetings will have to be in our offices, and we have to leave the building by 5. It was a very clear, please don't bother us again message. The Corps changed. This was direction that we believe came very directly from Washington in terms of Corps policy. And the policy change was the Corps offices or district offices like San Francisco or Sacramento or others around the country to find ways of integrating permitting with habitat plans, with area plans of some sort. And I think this is part good government and it's part survival of an agency when you don't have enough staff time to do everything that's on your plate. How can we make things simpler? Suffice to say, the San Francisco Corps learned a lesson from East Contra Costa where they didn't cooperate very well and they got slapped down for it. And we came along right after the fact about a year and a half ago and said, would you be interested in cooperating with us? And they were most interested in cooperating. East Contra Costa trailed the path for us on that. They cut the path. We followed right behind them. We are in the midst of working with the Corps of Engineers on a regional general permit that will link about 90% of their federal waters permitting within the habitat plan area, permit area, with the conditions and requirements of the habitat plan. The great fear from private sector and public sector has been without that, essentially end up 2 bites at the apple. This will link the biting of the apple together so that you satisfy the habitat plan, you satisfy core obligations. And that regional general permit is going to come out sometime in 2014. I have been hoping like mid-2014. That may be a little longer. Very honestly, we are, and it's really ICF in this regard, are pretty much carrying the Corps staff through the process. They don't have the time to do the analysis, etc., that they have to do, so we are doing the analysis for them, and then they review it and comment, and then we clean it up, and then they accept the analysis. But it's worth trying to get through the process. Regional water quality control boards are a somewhat more difficult, well, not somewhat, they are a more difficult task. The regional water quality control boards have not historically been particularly interested in working on with habitat agencies. They've not been interested in linking their permitting. That still remains the case, and the strategy we are using is to get through the Corps of Engineers process, get that permit in place, and then engage the regional water quality control boards. The objective from the standpoint of the elected officials, certainly in reviewing the final plan, was to get both the Corps and the regional board permits all linked together with the habitat plan. And we are well on the way with the Corps, but we essentially are very early in that stage, if that, with regional boards. And we can come back to that in a second. But then the fourth objective was to start working on implementation of conservation strategy issues, and that's where we are heading into in literally the next weeks. But those are the 4 objectives we set out for the first, essentially year plus of the agencies. And let me stop there and if there are any questions on that, and then we can talk a little bit about the conservation activities themselves that we anticipate starting folks work on in the next weeks, next months. I might add that not all of the administrative tasks are done, but we have made a lot of progress, and we will continue to have to push on some of those still unaddressed issues. We are doing that, but I think my sense is that we are over the biggest hump trying to get that all those policies and procedures, etc., in place, which has been this focus again for the first 7-8 months of the agency's life. Are there any questions on where we've been and the objectives?
Hi, Ken. This is Craig. Can you hear me?
Yes.
What do we do about the budget? I mean, what's our role in the budget? What should we do? We see it, do we comment on it or make suggestions, or, I mean, it's kind of out of our hand in some respects, so what exactly is our role?
Michelle, you're going to need to provide on somebody that asked me a little bit of a startles.
So Craig is asking what the PAC's role is in the budget. Is it just for their review, or are they being asked to review and comment?
Or suggest?
It is to review and comment, and this year, we're mixing a variety of things together for you. One is we're providing the overview of the current budget, and we felt it important to provide that information, that status report to you. We're also providing information that we have on the next year's budget. I would treat this as a exception to the way I hope the process works in the future, in that the PAC's role is to review the budget. Well, right now we don't have the budget for 2014-15. At the same time, the objective is to take the budget for 2014-15 to the governing board and implementing board in March. And the reason for that is the meeting schedule were such that we needed to get it there in March in order to be assured we would have an adopted budget in place by the end of June or the start of the budget year. The governing board adjusted their schedule in January to move back from a July meeting to a June meeting. We now have that meeting before the end of the budget year. I anticipate that in the future, my successor and others will have for the PAC a more detailed budget that would be prepared and distributed to the PAC and to the implementation board and the governing board, and tie the reviews together in a more timely way. We ask you to bear with us this first year as we give you not as much information as we really should, but it's where we are in the process, and again trying to work our way through this. So you won't see all the detail on what will go out in March once it isn't available yet, but it will come together in the next 4 or 6 weeks.
That's good, thanks.
Ken, follow-up, this walk lines, follow-up question on that. If we meet quarterly and we're going to respond to the budget, so next year, that means staff would have to have the budget, the recommended budget, by the January meeting for us to make a recommendation in time to have the board itself look at the budget in March.
And I'll give you my personal answer on that, which is I would hope that budget process next year, given the fact that we'll have a regularly scheduled meeting in June for the governing board, which when we started this process we didn't have, that we could have a budget process that brings budget to the implementation board and governing board in June and the public advisory committee in May. That would be, I think, a much better process. The concern we had, very honestly, one is we didn't have right sequencing of meetings, and second is that we need very good assurance from governing board and implementation board that we will have a quorum. We did have a meeting without a quorum on the governing board, and that was a hiccup. But if we can be, I think if my successor can be comfortable that with the governing board in terms of setting out a budget process, people are committed to attending the meeting in June, as well as the meeting, and then that May-June process can work together much smoothly. This year we didn't feel we could take the chance of going that deep into the process for fear of finding ourselves on July 1st with no adopted budget.
Thank you. Other questions?
Yes, I have. Ken, this is Julie
Okay.
Hutch. Ken, do you hear me?
Have questions?
Yeah.
Let me turn to
Ken,
pages
Not loud enough.
in that adoption process, pages 15, 16, and 17. I know that I'm sure people are intimately interested in all of the administrative detail, but I think you're probably more interested in the conservation activities, which is absolutely appropriate. If people find page 15 and 16, beginning of 17, in the FY14 budget, current year budget, work area 3 identifies conservation strategy implementation. This is the work that we see as beginning in earnest in the very literally next weeks, carrying through the end of this budget year, and I think certainly carrying on, for many cases, into the budget year that starts July 1st, 2014. I've talked a little bit about Cost Center 3.1, waters, in terms of the permitting. The other piece of that that is critical is actually the creation of restoration and or wetland creation sites to actually go out and implement, construct wetland restoration and creation sites. This is critical in the sense in terms of the Corps of Engineers, in terms of staying ahead of their permitting process. It's critical from the sense of the wildlife agencies for staying ahead of their permitting process. So what we intend to do in the next 6 months, and we are in a process of, for all of these issues, literally in the next weeks, refining the details of how we grapple with these. From an overall standpoint, what I anticipate is that for each of the major areas, we will assemble, the agency will assemble a working group of members of the community who are particularly interested in a topic, members of the academic community who have expertise, members of local partners who have particular expertise and interest, and grapple with, okay, how do we get from here to where we feel we need to be in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. For waters, where we need to be is a site identified, plans developed, and heading into construction of a particular restoration or creation site. My sense is that by the beginning, by a year from now, as we head toward the construction season, post-rainy construction season, we should be well on the path to actually really bidding out construction documents. And there will be a lot of work needed in terms of identifying sites, potential sites, evaluating the sites, and then as we hone in on one or even 2 sites, and I would personally like to see us hone in on 2 high-ranking sites, prepare the 60% drawings, the 90%, 100% plan drawings, work with the regulatory agencies in terms of their permitting process, their approval process, and get us into a actual construction cycle on this. And that's going to be the focus certainly for the next, well, it'll be a focus for the next 5 months of this year, but it will go on after that. It will need to go. Any questions on that? Let me ask the questions as I move down the list rather than saving them all up to the end.
Julie, did you still have a question? We do have a question, Ken.
Ken, can you hear me?
Sort of. Michelle will translate.
Okay. I just wanted to know what the 10% of the RGP that we're looking at would not be covered. You said up to 90%. What's the 10%? What are they not looking to cover?
So Julie is asking what the 10% that would not be covered in the RGP is.
The 10% of the projects, and that's a very educated estimate, are primarily, well, they're larger projects. They're projects with more than a half acre of wetland impact. We think that right now, most of those are Santa Clara Valley Water District work on flood protection and related stream activities, which involve far more acreage than a half acre. The Water District has been quite comfortable in pushing ahead on the regional general permit. They have assumed all the way along that these larger flood-related works especially will require an individual consultation and approval by the wildlife agencies and for. In fact, that's written into the plan. There's no, plan includes a required consultation and approval on specific larger flood projects. Those will be the major ones. There could be some private sector projects that end up with more than a half an acre, but those really will be the unusual ones. Most of the private sector projects fall within the half acre max and 300 lineal feet of stream impact, and they'll fall under the regional general permit.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I think that's very quick. I mean, so if I interpret what you said, Ken, correctly, you'll be meeting with, I think, county parks and the Open Space Authority really in the next couple of weeks to try to identify, you know, a couple locations potentially for wetland restoration.
Right. We will be meeting with them about the process. I don't expect in the next 2 weeks to identify a site, but to bring them into the process in terms of an active partnership role in all of this. The likelihood of the first wetland restoration or creation sites being on current open space, current parkland that will come into the reserve system. There's about 12,000, over 12,000 acres of county parkland and about 1,000 acres of open space authority land that will are anticipated to come into the reserve system in the plan. And finding sites on some of those, finding wetland sites on some of those sites will be the first priority in terms of looking for sites. Wetland sites need to be part of the reserve system. So that focuses the physical attention, rather quickly. So we will be engaging with them. We're certainly not going to see a site selected in the next few weeks, but they know that this process, staff at both parks and OSA know this. And we've talked about this overall process of evaluating sites for reserve system and then sites for wetlands. So we will be beginning that more serious specific discussion again in the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Has any land from county parks or the Open Space Authority actually been transitioned into the reserve system, or is there a timeline for that?
Betsy, Michelle, I'm going to need a little clarification on that.
Jan asked if any land has been transferred from county or another agency into the reserve system.
No, the transfer of land into the reserve system is accomplished by the preparation and the acceptance, in the case of this case would be the County Board of Supervisors, acceptance of a conservation easement. The value to the habitat plan and the habitat agency of the existing land is it made putting the reserve system together far more feasible. The value for the wildlife agencies, the way they can justify this land, normally existing protected open space would not be part of the reserve system. It already exists. But in this case, the additional protection will be in perpetuity commitments to preservation of the land for species-related uses, etc. So there will be a conservation easement developed that the county board would need to be approved, would need to approve, or the open space district board would need to approve. And that process is going to need to be carefully done, because staff, when they go to the board, or staff, when they go to the open space board, needs to be fully assured that that commitments they're making are consistent with the agency's objectives, parks objectives, open space authority objectives, and They're not giving up something that will come back later on to haunt them. So the sites have been identified in the habitat plan, but the specific details on those sites and how the easement gets worded and the management plan or whatever gets attached needs to be attached to that. That will all work out that really needs to be worked out, and I think it needs to be worked out in part on a site-by-site basis, because there will be enough differences, distinctions. For example, there may be a great site identified in the habitat plan, but there may be an area of that site that really needs to be outside of the reserve system because it's going to be a parking lot, trailhead facility or something like that. And so the easement needs to be drawn to keep those options open for county parks, OSA. So it is not, it needs to be a precise, very precise document, and that's what needs to be worked on.
The second part to Jan's question was if there was a timeline for that.
If you ask the wildlife agencies, they would say faster, faster. There's a timeline in the sense that within 2 years, there is a stay-ahead requirement. We have to have more land developed in the reserve system than we have issued permits for in a ratio in the plan, etc. So we have a stay-ahead requirement. The thinking is the first land going in the reserve system is likely to be, soon to be the existing open space. Do we have to do it this year? No. Do we need to be making progress on getting to that point of moving into the reserve system? Yes. And whether it enters in July of 2014 or December of 2014 or April of 2015 is less important than an indication we are making good progress toward getting to that end point. If we're not making good progress, the wildlife agencies are going to start developing a reasonable level of anxiety, and we will start hearing from them. But as long as we're making good progress within this 2-year or so window, that's the overall time frame.
Okay, thanks, Ken.
Ken, is there anything else on items 5 and 6 that you want to touch base with us tonight?
We've talked about waters, and we've really talked about 3.2, which is integrating the existing open space. Let me briefly, in sort of lumping things together, in the budget, there's 3.3 cost center, which is rangeland management, serpentine management, western growing owl, and connectivity and permeability. Each of these areas will have a working group assembled. They each contain particularly challenging conservation issues, and very different area by area. They each contain high levels of public participation and expectations. They will be different. I mean, Audubon Society clearly is very, very interested in western burrowing owls. The Cattlemen's Association is very interested in rangeland management. Connectivity and permeability. Connectivity is clearly the connection between elements of the reserve system, so that animals and plants, in certain cases, over time, can migrate over distances. So that's connectivity. Permeability is addressing blockages in those connections. A railroad track, interstate highway, 101 or whatever else. And so it's connectivity and permeability. That's of strong interest to any number of parts of the community. So we anticipate jumping in on all of those in the next while. And the last area is 3.4, which is monitoring adaptive management, reserve unit management. This is one where thinking through the data to be collected over time can be very, very beneficial than responding to data needs in real time somewhere down the road. Monitoring and adaptive management is many faceted part of the plan. You need to address those issues, figure out what is the most important information to collect, how to start monitoring. Technically, this may be the most difficult area, but enough of my colleagues have warned me that if you let this one slide, you'll pay for it in terms of scrambling later on with higher price data collection than you really need to do if you try to get out in front on this. Reserve unit management planning is the same type of thing. It will lead into specific management plans for reserve sites, but there are some bigger issues that need to be addressed in the context of the plan, and now is the time to put together essentially a data plan, an implementation plan of how we're going to go about doing this. And even if the data collection is going to be done 5 years from now, we need to have protocols, we need to start thinking about it so we get ahead of the curve on this. So this is both a very important part of the management plan, and the effort here is to try to undertake it in a way that carefully considers what costs to incur, because this is an area, 3.4 is an area where you can sink a lot of cost, a lot of money into scrambling data collection, and there's some real horror stories out there of agencies who have gotten behind on the curve on this and then paid for it dearly in terms of costs and high levels of anxiety in terms of how to try to get information that should have been gotten 3 years before, but nobody thought about it, and nobody got around to it. And then it's, oh my gosh, how do we do this stage? And that usually becomes more expensive. So these are the conservation areas, from wetlands to open space to the 4 land areas and then the data area, that are called out as the major emphasis. It's not the only one, but the major emphasis in the next remainder of this year, and again, it will extend on into certainly 2014 and 15. And I thought it was important to highlight those because people, I think, understandably ask, when are we going to start doing conservation? And it's a very, very good question, and we are going to do it, and this is the way we're going to start to attack it. We want to see a reserve system. We want to see wetlands. We have an obligation to bring them online, and this is the way we're trying to strategically do that. So, any questions on that overall approach, or anything else on the budget?
Hearing none.
Okay. Then the last agenda item, item 6, and these are all reviewing the information, is your action on these. This mid-year is the portion of the mid-year budget review, and it was a very unusual mid-year budget review in the sense that you had one past year, the 9 weeks, you had one current year, and then you had items for the next year. And that is somewhat oddball, but again, we're in an oddball situation starting an agency. The direction that I want to point out that went to the implementation board, there are a variety of agreements, and the staff report identifies sort of where we're going with those agreements, whether it be with Morgan Hill, County for Controller Treasurer, County for Geographic Information Systems, legal services. And then what I wanted to highlight there was developing a fee for processing applications for coverage for the regional general permit. The Habitat Plan contains no funding for implementing a regional general permit because in essence, the regional general permit came very late in the process, possibility of doing it. There was an errata document prepared for the Habitat Plan that came out of the city of San Jose, primarily, in terms of regional general permit and wetlands permitting. It also contains a variety of corrections, typographical errors, and tables were corrected, etc. But that is really where the issue of implementing a regional general permit became lodged in the Habitat Plan. And what we need is a funding source, because part of our growing commitment to the regional general permit for the Corps of Engineers, is that the Habitat Agency will collect, review, and make sure that applications that go to the board staff, to the Corps staff, to the Corps of Engineers staff, are complete applications. One of the Corps staff, and the same thing for the regional board, one of their ongoing complaints is they get applications that are not complete. And so they start a review process only to find that they need more information, and they get sent back to somebody for more information, and then they start the review process all over again. And the commitment we have given them is that when we send the applications will come through the Habitat Agency, and they will be complete. And there will be a cover sheet that explains how this meets regional general permit and the various mitigation and other obligations. So from the Corps standpoint, their review may be 15 minutes rather than 5 or 10 hours. And that is a tremendous incentive for them to buy into a regional general permit. If they can simplify their internal process and spend much less time. And so that's part of the process, but we will need a cost recovery fee to address that. There will be cost recovery. Some applications may be quite simple to do in an hour and a half or something like that. Some will be more complicated, and then there will be the problem ones where the applicant needs to be worked with and meetings and whatever all else. And again, that needs to be a cost recovery. There's no other funding source in the Habitat Agency to undertake that. And I wanted to highlight that because as a new agency, it's sort of a, what the heck are you doing? You're less than a year old, you're talking about new fees already. And the new fees is either related to that strong push for the regional general permit and the value that I think all of the elected officials, all the different approval bodies, but certainly coalesced around the city of San Jose's approval, that they all saw as a big benefit from the Habitat plan, for both the public and the private sector when they did. So I want to highlight that we didn't want that to be a surprise for anybody down the line, or if you hear somebody talk about it, you at least have a little bit of background to say, well, here's what's going on. And again, for more detail or people have more questions, please refer them to me. I'm kind of the point of contact right now, and refer them to me. And Clara may end up answering the question, or I will answer the question. But we will be certain to respond and reply to questions.
Other comments? Okay, I have a couple of cleanup things that I'd just like to throw out here as we are at the end of the agenda. I don't know any of you folks. None of you know me. Can we get that, and this would then, some of it would go on the website, including name, contact information, including email, where that members of the public or ourselves could share stuff, with the caveat that you can't, on business that may be coming before us or is before us, less than 4 people can talk about an item between themselves, and you're in real danger of violating the Brown Act if you go beyond 2 or 3, because someone might inadvertently contact others, and I know that from being on public boards and commissions previously. And also, just for my own knowledge again, and hopefully for yours, just, you know, a little bit on who you are. Would some of this be on the applications that we filled out?
It is on the applications. The applications were included with the staff report that went to the implementation board. So that information is there, and I can forward that to all of you if you'd like, so you can see them. As far as the rosters, I have developed a roster. I've asked that you all give me your contact information. I don't want to assume that what's on the application is necessarily the best way to reach you. And the second part of that is, do you wish that all that information be made public?
Well, it is public.
Correct, but you don't have to have your home address. You don't
Correct.
have to make all that information public. So if we develop a roster and it's posted on the web for the world, you may have information that you're not comfortable having out there. So I can follow up with an email asking that you do provide your contact information, and if there's anything that you wish be not made public, of course it would be available to your fellow committee members so that you can get a hold of each other, but maybe not necessarily on the website if that's your choosing.
Do others concur? Okay.
Walter, are you asking about getting to know among ourselves, or having the public be able to contact us to put information? I'm not, or both of those?
Well, kind of both, but I think we do need at least a contact email, probably a phone number, if a member of the public has a question, a concern, and for some reason that they call us first before we refer them to Ken.
So,
Go ahead.
This is Ken, and I would actually agree with that, and Michelle's framework for expertise on this, I think, is important. That we want to make sure that information. I think with being a member of the Public Advisory Committee, there is an expectation that contact information will be available to the public, and that's we want to make sure that it's the right information in terms of both phone numbers and email addresses, and we don't inadvertently provide something that is for you inappropriate. That could be an office email, it can be a personal email or whatever, but it's your choice as to how that information gets you. But there should be a contact, I would say, both telephone and email.
Can I add something to that? I would appreciate to know right now who is representing what specific interests, since the Public Advisory Committee is set up that way. And then also I think that would be helpful for the public on the website to know who has which representation and what the vacancies are as well, Michelle, which will be kind of obvious, but that way I won't have to do the math.
Well, we have 3 vacancies right now, but unfortunately I don't have with me who is serving in what capacity as far as a member of the public. I can email that to you tomorrow.
That'd be great.
Email it to all of you.
Well, we can fess up now.
Or you guys can all just tell each other.
Well, not necessarily, because I know 4 of them, but 3 of them are all from the environmental community, in my estimation.
I believe, Joseph, you said you were
General public?
general public.
Okay. But Jan and Julie and I are all from the environmental community, but we're only allowed to have 2. So somebody's out of whack here.
General public.
Oh, okay. See, well, that I didn't know that. That's why it's good to know.
Okay,
So
and I have
then-
another general public.
You are as well?
Yes.
So we're missing 2 from the business community and 1 from the farming and ranching community?
Yes.
Great.
Ah.
yeah, I know I'm not, can I talk?
Yes.
Can everyone just go around and introduce themselves and just say a little bit
That
of
would be
something?
next
I thought we were going to do that in the beginning, and it never happened. So,
Go
you
ahead.
want to start?
So I'm Jan Hintermeister, and I was on this, in fact, early in this process, I was part of the, well, still am part of the County Parks Commission. And as part of that, I was appointed to be a member of the stakeholder group. So I followed a lot of this, development of the plan all the way through over the past, I don't know how many years. And it was,
October 2005.
So that's my connection, is through the stakeholder group, and then when I heard about the opportunity to continue in this capacity, I felt at least qualified.
And you live in what city?
Santa Clara.
Thank you.
I'm Jennifer Shear. I'm the Executive Director of the Farm Bureau in Santa Clara County. Our office is here in Morgan Hill, and I live in San Jose. I was part of the Stakeholder Committee since 2010, which is when I started at the Farm Bureau, so I've been there for a little over 4 years. And also went to all the liaison group meetings. I've actually read a good portion. I won't say I've read the entire plan. and my family farms rice and walnuts, so I'm very passionate about the agricultural community and ensuring that their interests are protected throughout the implementation of the plan, and not just their interests, but during the development of the plan, there almost seemed an insensitivity to species themselves on behalf of the wildlife agencies. I felt it's all about take, it's all about numbers. And to me, it all came down to the implementation where the rubber hits the road. So hopefully through this process and remaining involved with the implementation board and the governing board, we'll be able to ensure that the plan gets implemented appropriately.
My name is Joseph Lovelace. I live in San Jose. I think I mentioned earlier I'm a recent graduate from San Jose State in their Environmental Studies Department. And I became interested in the plan in 2010. Needed a subject for a paper and sort of went from there. Got involved with some other aspects of the Habitat Conservation Plan just for my own curiosity. And I'm here on the board because I'm interested in the plan. I think it's a worthwhile plan. And I look forward to seeing it sort of grow, and I really look forward to seeing the preserve area sort of establish and make this connection and fulfill its possibilities. And I'm glad to be a part of that. Thank you.
Julie Hutchison, I'm with the Committee for Green Foothills. My predecessor, Brian Schmidt, who's now a Water District board member, was on the stakeholder committee, and when he left Committee for Green Foothills, I took over on the stakeholder committee. We're very invested in the plan since the beginning, so we want to continue following up with the implementation. So that's why I was interested in being part of this.
Hi, I'm Craig Edgerton. I currently am the Executive Director of the Silicon Valley Land Conservancy. We are a fairly small nonprofit that mainly focus on preservation of agricultural lands and habitat for endangered species. We own and manage quite a bit of land for the Bay checker spot butterfly and hope to increase that and help out here. So there are potential situations down the road and for conflicts of interest, and I will let anybody know when I feel that those are where we might have those run into. I do live in San Jose, and I'm very interested in seeing additional species covered, as you might have told from what I've already said.
All right, walk lines. I am a 49-year resident of Gilroy. I am on the Gavilan College Board of Trustees and various other things in the South County area. And I was not on the stakeholder. I'm not a member of the stakeholder. So I'm a latecomer to the game.
Oh, by the way, I was on the stakeholders group also from the beginning. So,
Tara, any other questions?
No, it's actually really nice to put faces with names and comment letters that I reviewed for the Habitat Plan.
Thank you. Okay,
I've read your words.
A couple more that I want to touch base on. So somehow the meeting information will include the May 1, not May 8. Okay, and then does anyone know when the first permits are going to be issued?
Well,
that's just a general question.
Like an extension to a private or public applicant?
Yes.
I know that we have some PSCs that are seeking coverage, and they'll either be approved in the March or May meetings. I don't know about private applicants. I haven't heard of anyone that's been approved. A lot of them are going through the pipeline process. But one was mentioned maybe next month, a private applicant being approved. And as far as public projects, there's none that I know of.
Thank you. And then the last one, these cups, are these compostable? They have a coating on them.
No, they're not.
Really?
They're not compostable or recyclable. They have a wax coating.
Some kind of cookie.
I can bring them back. I can bring them back to San Francisco. We can compost them there.
Thank you.
That's
right.
No. I mean, does the city council know that?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Should I mention it to Mayor Tate, or just you'll convey it?
I can convey it to him if you'd like me to.
Please. I mean, I'm only one of 9. Do others agree?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
And then, just so
I
you
have a
all
couple.
know, I have developed a roster and included all of your contact information that I pulled from the applications. I believe I sent that to you earlier this week to comment on. If I don't hear back, I'll assume that it's good to go. And that roster does include the governing board, implementation board, and their alternates as well. So you'll have all of their contact information and they will have yours. And then we can post the appropriate information on the website. It seems, per Ken's comments and your ratings, that phone numbers and emails would be appropriate. If you'd like your address posted on there, you can let me know and we can put that up as well.
Okay, and then Craig has some other
Just a
cleanup
couple of
stuff.
house cleaning things. I noticed the video camera, and I know that city council meetings often are taped and on the website. Are these meetings going to be on the website for available?
Yes.
Are they live, or are they just going to be taped?
Right now, I don't know that Larry is streaming it live, but it is taped and it will get posted. We send the link to the website administrator and they post it.
Okay.
The Habitat Agency is in the process of developing their own website, and when they do that, it will tie in with how the city streams videos and posts them on the web.
Okay, I assumed that, but I wasn't sure. And then the second thing is, will we receive copies of all agendas, minutes, notes, everything from both the implementation board and the governing board?
That has not been directed to me. That may be a good question for Ken.
Could we get those?
So right now, what we can do is we can add you to the distribution list for those agendas. And then each set of minutes from the preceding meeting is on that agenda to be approved, and the whole set of minutes is there. So that's no problem to add you to those distribution lists.
Thank you, I appreciate
I think
that.
that's a good idea. Other cleanup wishes, wants?
I have a question. Will we have contact information through the agency for the public outreach part of the participation? So will there be a email address or something through the agency? Or I don't want to use my own, and I can establish a second email address and contact information.
I can address, so I'm going to state we're revamping the website, and there are a number of buttons that the public can use to either contact the Habitat Agency, get on a mailing list, or be notified. So, so yes, that is possible for the general public to access the Habitat Agency directly. Is that?
Great.
Others? Just to jump on what you said about email, if you use your private email, there is a case pending in San Jose that's at the appellate court level where your public stuff that you are putting on your private email may be subject to subpoena. So just, I would suggest that if you want to make sure they're separate, establish a separate.
Thank you.
Other, so along that line, maybe, I thought Joe was asking if we could have
a specific like,
specific email that's something Valley Habitat Plan, C. Edgerton at Valley Habitat Plan, something like, I thought that's what he was asking. So is that a possibility? Can that be part of the website? That way, that would be specifically for any business, and I don't know whether that could be forwarded by staff or some kind of a link. I'm not a technical person.
It can be tied in. However, there will be a cost of sorts. And I think Ken would have to, okay it. And how are the other two boards doing this?
So the other two boards
public, yeah.
are all elected, and
officials.
their position, So they're all elected officials, so they already have an email established that they use for this business, or they're employees of agencies. So they're using their work or elected official emails. But we can absolutely look into it. I don't know that that's been specified or discussed. I can definitely work with Tara and our IT manager, Jeff, and see what it would take to set that up. I don't think that it's incredibly difficult or costly, but I don't know what those answers would be. So I can absolutely look into that and let you all know. We can set something up. If not, the alternative is, if you were comfortable with it, you could set up a separate email through Hotmail or Gmail or any other email provider that's specific to this, and that can be what we publish on the rosters and on the website and for all of your PAC business. But I can look into that and should be able to get you some information shortly.
Thanks.
And so then we could change on the website?
Correct.
Okay, good. Okay. Anything else to bring before the board?
Did we ask whether there's any public comment?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Do we have any public comment? Hearing none, we need a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Seconded?
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good job. Good. No, see, I can tell, man. You got this down. You did it before.
Yes.